My best friend of 20 years betrayed me by having an affair with my husband of 12 years, getting pregnant, and destroying my family. My husband, Dev, and I started dating when I was 21, and he was 23. We were together for nearly 2 years before he proposed. We've been married for the last 12 years and have 2 kids together. During our second year of dating, Dev introduced me to his mother, Mallory. I liked her from the first meeting and tried my best to impress her, but unfortunately, the feeling wasn't mutual. Mallory had been a widow for a long time since her husband passed away from a heart attack years ago. She raised Dev alone, so they were obviously very close. You could say he was a bit of a mama's boy and was nervous about letting me meet her. He always desperately wanted her approval in everything he did. The main reason Mallory never liked me was because I came from an upper middle class family with parents who owned multiple businesses. Growing up, I had a comfortable life. Although my parents supported me by covering my college expenses and buying me my first car so I could get to work on time, they also instilled the value of being independent and finding my own footing in life. I've always worked hard to support myself and never asked my parents for financial help after I graduated college. Contrary to my life, my husband had a more difficult upbringing. His father worked in the military, so he was seldom present, and after his father passed away, he and Mallory became inseparable. Mallory was an alcoholic, so from a very young age, Dev had to take care of her. He started working at McDonald's while still young as a part-time job to earn extra money. When he went to college, he had to drop out because he didn't like pursuing his communications degree anymore. He told me how unhappy he was during this time. Being a college dropout, it was very difficult for him to find a job, so he started looking for options that didn't require a degree. He began working as a freelance writer and surprisingly did quite well for himself. He loved traveling and was a digital nomad for a few years before finally meeting me and settling down. Through all this, his mother would ask him to send her a monthly allowance, which he willingly provided despite the strain it placed on his finances. When our relationship started getting serious, I finally told him about my family and our generational wealth. He didn't believe me but was shocked after he Googled my family. Dev was angry at me for hiding it for so long and accused me of not trusting him. I tried to clarify that a lot of people in my past wanted to be with me because of my family, which is why I had learned to wait before revealing my generational wealth. He understood and was mostly fine with it, but occasionally, he would taunt me about how I never have to try so hard or how I'll never know how it feels to work hard. This would really offend me because, despite what my parents offered me in life, I worked hard to establish myself in my field. I loved managing influencers and brands, and that's how I funded my lifestyle without needing my parents' help. Dev never understood this, and in hindsight, this should have been my first red flag. When we decided to move in together, Dev was quick to suggest moving into my place since it was bigger. I agreed and started discussing how we would split rent, but Dev didn't like that. He started telling me how he earned so little as a freelance writer and that because I came from old money, I should prove my love for him by helping him out. This meant paying for his share of the bills as well as rent. I told him that although I didn't think this was fair, I could let him go on rent, but he had to pay his own bills. Dev raised his voice and went on a rant about how selfish I was and that not paying his bills would show how cruel I was. After arguing back and forth, I finally caved in. I had to cut back on a lot to pay for all our bills, but I was madly in love with him. Meanwhile, Dev continued sending his mother monthly allowances and buying her extravagant gifts. Whenever I pointed out how he had the money to send to his mother yet wouldn't pay bills, he would get angry and tell me how his mother needed the money more than us since she was a single, old parent. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking my video. Feeling guilty, I stopped bringing it up altogether. When Dev proposed to me for marriage, I was ecstatic. Looking back, he put the least effort into proposing to me. I thought he would go all out for the proposal, but it turns out he thought proposing in our backyard was a good idea. To his credit, he did ask my parents for my hand like a gentleman. My mother, who adored Dev, suggested he get help from my best friend, Kylie, to plan the proposal. He agreed, and they both came up with the genius idea of proposing to me in my backyard in front of my family and friends. Kylie had been my best friend since high school. Our mothers grew up together, which is how we became friends. She was like my sister and soulmate, we had always been solid with each other. Her family was like my family, and vice versa. My mom and her mom were as close as sisters, and our bond naturally mirrored that. When I introduced Dev to Kylie, they became good friends as well. She helped him not only plan the proposal but also choose my ring. To be honest, I was a bit taken aback by the surprise proposal, but seeing all my family gathered to celebrate the happy day made me feel better, even though I was slightly disappointed at being proposed to in my backyard. My mother, Kylie, and Kylie's mother were the first to hug and congratulate me. Dev's mother, Mallory, was also happy for us and told me she had high expectations of me as her daughter-in-law, emphasizing that I should do everything in my power to keep her son happy. Despite my initial reservations, it turned out to be a happy night for all of us. Eventually, Dev and I got married. Even after marriage, I continued to pay for everything around the house while he didn't spend a penny on me. I funded our weekly dates and yearly vacations because Dev insisted he was saving money for our future. When I got pregnant with our first child, James, I had to quit my job due to a difficult pregnancy. Dev didn't take the news well. He argued with me, saying that if I didn't work, we wouldn't have enough money to sustain ourselves with a child. Help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your support is what makes this journey possible, so don't forget to subscribe. I cried a lot during that time and finally opened up to my parents about our situation. My mother sympathized with Dev instead of me, saying he was right and pointing out how many mothers work while pregnant. My dad, on the other hand, was furious. He called Dev to give him a piece of his mind and told him it was time to step up for his family. He warned Dev that if he didn't change his behavior, a divorce would be better for everyone. The mention of divorce made Dev nervous. He knew we had signed a prenup at my father's insistence before marriage, which meant that if we divorced, he would lose access to the house, the car, and the lifestyle my finances supported. For the first time, Dev stopped sending his mother her allowance and began paying some of the household bills. I still paid the rent since I had savings, but the change made Mallory resent me even more. She blamed me for cutting her off from the money she used to get from her son. When I gave birth to James, I was overjoyed, but it was an incredibly difficult time. Everyone visited us in the hospital to congratulate us, but Dev barely showed up because he was too busy with work. Kylie stayed with me for days until I recovered and could go home. Once I was home, the challenges of being a new mother hit me hard. My parents and Kylie's mom helped as much as they could, but Mallory did nothing to assist. Instead, whenever she visited James, she only offered unsolicited criticism. She commented on how I needed to lose weight or how I should tend to James faster when he cried. Her remarks were always aimed at me, never at her son, who didn't lift a finger to help with the baby. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and increasingly lonely. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was experiencing postpartum depression, PPD, a condition that many mothers face but seldom talk about. I tried to share my struggles with Dev, but he remained distant and dismissive. He said it was solely my responsibility as a mother and refused to help, not even changing a single diaper or feeding James. As the days passed, the weight of my responsibilities grew heavier, and the burden of PPD became unbearable. I reached out to my parents for help. My dad was understanding, but my mother dismissed my feelings, insisting that PPD wasn't real and that I should just be strong for my baby. She scolded me for expecting Dev to help, saying it was my job as a mother. Her words hurt deeply, and combined with Dev's lack of support and Mallory's constant criticism, I felt like I was drowning. Kylie, however, was my rock during this time. I confided in her about my struggles and my marriage. She sympathized, called Dev out on his behavior, and supported me emotionally. Her unwavering presence was a lifeline during those dark days. A year later, to my shock, I found out I was pregnant again. It was unplanned, and I was not ready for another child so soon, but I chose to trust in God's plan and move forward with the pregnancy. Dev, however, was furious. He insisted I terminate the pregnancy, arguing we couldn't afford another baby. This led to heated arguments, and I eventually decided it was time to get back to work. I reached out to my old boss, who welcomed me back as a freelancer until a permanent position became available. Although my second pregnancy was difficult as well, I was determined this time due to my added responsibility as a parent. This time, when I went back to work, I decided not to deposit my entire paycheck into our joint savings account. I wanted to think and be prepared for my future as well as my kids. So, I started to keep 50% of my paycheck and only deposited the remaining 50% into our joint account. Once I started earning money, Dev became lazier every day. He suddenly started to complain about how much he disliked his job and how he wanted to quit it. I would try to talk him out of it, reminding him that he didn't have a college degree, so he needed to stick with this well-paying job. This would piss him off since he didn't like being reminded that he was a college dropout. Dev would argue that since I had taken a break, he deserved to take a break too. I argued back, saying that I never took a break, that I was pregnant and struggling while forming another human being inside me. Despite our arguments, Dev decided to quit his job, saying we had enough savings and that now that I was earning money, he could rest for a while. He then spent his entire day playing video games while I did household chores, looked after the baby, and worked at my job. I would leave James with my parents whenever I went to work, as my mother didn't mind watching him. When I would come back home after picking up James from my mother, I would see Dev sitting in the same spot on the sofa, playing his video games. This went on for a while, and I started to grow tired of taking on all the responsibilities as a parent. In anger, I confronted him about how he needed to spend time looking for a new job. Dev didn't like that, which is why he started going to his friend's place every day, where they would both play video games. His friend Clinton was a middle-aged divorce whose wife had cheated and left him. This made Clinton resent every woman, and he was quite misogynistic, which is why I didn't like meeting him or going to his place. As Dev started to spend more and more time at his friend's place, our arguments increased. I was getting tired of being a single parent since Dev literally contributed nothing, but I held on for the sake of my children. When I gave birth to Nina, our second child, Dev was apparently so busy that he forgot to check my multiple calls and messages when I went into labor, which is why he missed it. I never once suspected him, even though the red flags were clearly visible. Kylie was also missing when I called her for help, so in the end, my parents had to take me to the emergency room. She came the next day to visit me and the baby and told me how sorry she was for not being there for me since she was stuck at work, which was fine with me. After Nina was born, I finally put my foot down and told Dev that this was his last chance and that if he didn't go back to work, I was going to pack my things and leave. This resulted in a huge fight between us, but I didn't care anymore. I knew that as my children's mother, I needed to be with someone who could be equally responsible because it would be impossible for me to take care of everything alone. I told him that I would never hold anything against him and that he was free to walk away, but Dev told me he would start looking for a job the next day. This was unexpected since I thought he would resist or argue with me, but surprisingly, he agreed, or so I thought. The next day, while my husband was in the shower and I was taking his dirty clothes for laundry, I heard a ping on his phone. I turned my head to see a message on his lock screen from a familiar number. I stopped breathing as my eyes widened in shock. I picked up the phone to click on the message that read, "Will you be telling her about us? I'm pregnant and can't hold off the news any longer." I was frozen in place as I kept rereading the message. When my husband got out of the shower, he saw me standing still with his phone in hand. He rushed to snatch his phone from my hands, but it was too late. I put the laundry basket down, walked toward my husband, and slapped him as hard as I could. I didn't even think twice. It felt like my body was possessed by someone else. I was shaking in anger, and my husband was shocked by my reaction as well. His eyes widened in shock as he put two and two together and started stammering about how this was all just a big misunderstanding. I looked him straight in the eyes and told him he was dead to me. I packed my bags, packed the kids' bags, and drove them to my parents' house. My parents were shocked to see me standing in the doorway with my children and luggage in tow. Seeing them, I broke down and told them everything. I've been crying continuously for the last 2 days. I just can't believe how my life has ended. I told my boss everything, and she graciously allowed me to take a few days off. Honestly, I am at a loss for words, which is why I am on Reddit. My best friend of 20 years decided to betray me by sleeping with my husband of 12 years. Not only that, she's now pregnant, and this means Dev and my marriage are pretty much over. Dev and Kylie have been calling me multiple times and sending me messages, saying I should at least hear them out, but I refuse to do so. Dev is begging me not to divorce him, saying I should think about our children. Am I the asshole if I go ahead and divorce my cheating husband and take everything from him? Update: Hey guys, thank you for your messages and comments. I know it's been a month since I left you all hanging without an update, but a lot has been happening in my life. So, I've been dealing with it. I am back at work because no matter what happens in life, I can't afford to miss work for too long. Honestly, work feels like a welcome distraction. During this time, a lot of you suspected correctly about Dev and Kylie cheating on me for a long time. Kylie sent me a long message saying how she didn't mean to, but she has apparently fallen in love with Dev. Now that she's going to be a mother, she claims she has to think about herself. She explained that she had been pushing Dev to tell me the truth. On the other hand, Dev admitted he knew he'd lose access to the life I provided if I found out. He said sleeping with Kylie was a mistake, but because she's now pregnant, he has no way out. He's been begging me to forgive him, even going so far as to suggest that we convince Kylie to give up her baby so we could raise it together. His delusions and entitlement only fuel my anger more. As for how they got together, it turns out that while he was supposedly playing video games all day, Dev had been opening up to Kylie behind my back. He complained about being mentally distressed in our marriage because I was forcing him to get a job. According to Dev, Kylie understood him and listened to his problems. When he talked to Clinton about this, instead of calling him out, Clinton encouraged him to meet up with Kylie. Clinton apparently told him she was more of a woman than I was. One day, Kylie and Dev decided to meet up just to talk, and that two-faced woman ended up sleeping with my husband. I can't fathom her motivations, especially since she knew how shitty of a partner Dev was to me, but at this point, I honestly don't care. Kylie even mentioned in her messages that I should be happy to be rid of Dev since I had wanted to leave him but lacked the courage. Maybe this was her plan all along, who knows? Looking back, I'm sure the day I went into labor, both Dev and Kylie were together, which is why neither of them answered my calls for help. This realization only deepens my hurt and anger. But that's not even the most shocking part. When I first told my parents about Dev and Kylie, my mother refused to believe me, while my dad called Dev and shouted at him for a good 15 minutes. Even as I cried, my mother tried to convince me that I might be mistaken, insisting that Kylie would never betray me like this. I decided to call Kylie's mother to tell her everything. Unlike my own mother, she was furious and completely on my side. Since she knew I would never make up such a thing, she kept repeating how sorry she was and cried with me for a while. She really understood how betrayed I felt at that moment. After talking with my dad, I have decided to file for divorce. We already have a lawyer in mind, and with my prep and Dev's cheating, this divorce proceeding is going to be easy. What might be tricky is when it comes to the custody of my children, but I know that Dev will never want any responsibility for them, so I'm confident I will get full custody. Throughout all this, my mother has been very against my decision to divorce. When she realized that no matter how much she requested me not to get a divorce, I wasn't going to listen, she seemed to have changed her tactics suddenly and started saying how I should give up full custody of my children to Dev. This took me by surprise when she first suggested it, but I thought she was joking at first. When she continued saying this for the last few days, I finally lost my temper today and started shouting at her about how dare she suggest something like this to me, but she didn't say anything and walked out of the room. Her behavior has started to make me feel extremely suspicious. Why would my own mother ask me to give up custody of my children when she knows that Dev is not a capable parent? I feel I need to sit down and confront her in front of my dad to find out exactly what she has in mind. Update: it's only been a few days since my last update, but my DMs are flooded with people coming up with their own theories. I know for some of you this might seem like an entertaining story, but for me, this is the reality of my life. My lawyer has served divorce papers to Dev, and he called me crying like a man-child, begging me to forgive him. But I just laughed at his misery and told him to get ready to lose everything. James and Na are doing well despite this family turmoil. Dev never spent much time with them, so they hardly noticed that he's missing. It has been very difficult for me to take care of a baby while going through all this, but I am glad to have my dad's support. Kylie's mother also came to visit me. Since she lives in another city, she hasn't bought into even talking or listening to Kylie and has told me how she plans to cut her off. Since this is an embarrassing situation, not just for my family but also for her family, she says how ashamed she is of her own daughter. She also knows how deadbeat of a father Dev has been, so she knows that eventually, Kylie will be contacting her for financial assistance, which she is firmly against. The news of my divorce due to Kylie's backstabbing has spread to my friend group as well as my relatives, and everyone's on my side. People are not that forgiving, so they started sending foul messages to both Kylie and Dev, abusing both of them. This is when Mallory finally gave me a call. Throughout the last month, she didn't have a single ounce of decency to call me for comfort or to apologize. I'm sure she knew about all this and was probably ashamed that her picture-perfect son messed up his great life and knocked up another girl. She called to tell me how Dev was suffering so much since everyone in his family had also found out about his indiscretions and was pissed at him. I kept quiet as she unabashedly continued to say how, as a good daughter-in-law, I should return back to him and retract the divorce proceedings. She tried to justify her son's vile actions by saying how men can sometimes stray from the path, but that it was our responsibility as women to bring them back. I couldn't hear her nonsense any longer, so I asked her to shut up. She was taken aback by the sudden rise in my voice since I had always been good and respectful to her. I told her that she should be ashamed of giving birth to a worthless man like Dev, who was nothing but a leech, and that if she ever called me back, I would make sure to take every single penny of his during our divorce by bleeding him dry. I reminded her that I was the one who had taken care of her man-child our entire marriage, so she had no right to ask me for anything more now that he had knocked up my best friend. Mallory tried to apologize as a last-ditch effort to protect her son, but I warned her that I would take legal action against her if she ever called again. It felt good to finally stand up to her and show her that I was not the same timid daughter-in-law that she had met. Dev was going to get exactly what was coming for him, and no one would be able to protect him. I also sat down to talk with my parents yesterday regarding my mother's suspicious behavior. I had already given a heads up to my dad about how she had been forcing me to give up full custody of my children, so he was ready to find the truth from her. I straightforwardly asked my mother why she had been asking me to give Dev full custody of my children, even though it was never going to happen. My mother first hesitated, but my dad kept grilling her, and finally, she opened up. To our shock, my mother told me how after I had revealed to my parents about Kylie and my husband sleeping with each other, she had decided to confront Kylie about it since she didn't believe me. They met up, and Kylie started begging her for forgiveness. My mother couldn't believe that Kylie had really done something like this, but then Kylie started to tell her how she was pregnant and needed Dev to raise her child. My mother, instead of shouting at her, apparently felt sorry for her. She promised to help her out financially and tried to convince her to not break up mine and Dev's marriage, saying how Dev could continue to support her child even if he was married to me. Kylie didn't want that, so then my mother changed her tactics and started telling Kylie that if she was responsible for breaking up our marriage, then she should be responsible for raising the kids as well. Kylie was shocked at first to hear this, but my mother told her I suffered from PPD, so I was not a capable mother. The least that Kylie could do was raise Dev's children all together as a family since they all would be siblings anyway. She told her that I was never going to let Dev be a part of my children's lives, and according to my mother, apparently, my children needed a healthy parent like Dev more than me, since according to her, I am mentally sick. My mother even went as far as to convince Kylie by saying that if I gave up full custody of my children, then I would be required to pay a hefty child support, which Kylie could use to take care of her child. Also, this convinced Kylie, which is why my mother had changed her tune and had been forcing me to give up custody of James and Nina. When my dad and I grilled this information out of her, we were disgusted to say the least. I couldn't believe that I was facing yet another betrayal in my life. My own mother thought, because of my PPD, I was incapable enough to raise my own children, and she would rather have Kylie raise them than me. It shocked me that my mother failed to see how I fell into PPD in the first place because Dev refused to help me in any way, how I used to beg him to be an equal parent, while he would feign ignorance, how I would single-handedly take care of everything while he would look for an excuse to give up responsibility in any way. I started to cry since I didn't know how she could betray me like this after my husband and best friend did the same thing. My dad, who had been quiet for a while, asked my mother to simply get out of the house. My mother started crying as they kept arguing, but my dad told her that their marriage was over and he didn't want to see her face anymore. I don't remember much, but eventually, my mother left to stay at her sister's place. I honestly don't know what to do. It feels like I can't trust anyone anymore. Everyone seems to betray me like I mean nothing to them. Update 3, it's been 6 months since my last update, and I know it's been a long time. Thank you again, seriously, your comments, your support, your messages, all of it has been one giant breath of fresh air. Just knowing I have a whole online community willing to go to bat for me has kept me treading water these last couple of months. Your comments have popped up in my notifications when I felt like just giving up on my life, when it was too hard, and they have kept me going. First things first, I got my divorce last month. My dad, who has been my backbone this entire time, kept me pushing. We went ahead with my divorce proceedings, and as expected, Dev got nothing out of me thanks to my prenup agreement. When it came time for the custody of my children, he fought hard for full custody at first, but when that was refused, he tried to go for equal custody. My lawyer argued how he had been a deadbeat father our entire marriage, how he didn't have a proper job, how his mother was an alcoholic, and how he had even cheated on me and got another woman pregnant. This argument cost Dev dearly, and I was awarded full custody of our children while Dev would pay me monthly child support checks. Nothing made me feel more satisfied than watching his face droop in sadness and defeat. I looked back to see Mallory looking at me angrily, and I gave her a smirk. Just like I had promised, I got what I had wished for. Secondly, coming on to my mother, she has begged and begged me and my dad for forgiveness. My dad has firmly refused to let what she did go so easily and has asked her to go to therapy about her internalized misogyny so she can understand exactly how wrong she was to have treated me this way when I was so vulnerable. I know my parents love each other, and it breaks my heart to see them apart, but I do understand why my dad wants to talk to a therapist. My mother, to her credit, has been religiously going to therapy while she continues to stay with her sister. I don't know if it will help her in any way, but I hope she does change. Although I have blocked Kylie, I am still in contact with her mother. Kylie's mother, just like she had promised me, has cut off all contact with her daughter. She informed me how Kylie has even been removed from her will and they have added me instead. It seems comical to see how karma is slowly but surely catching up to Kylie. I've also heard from the grapevine that Dev doesn't want to marry Kylie and wants nothing to do with the child, just like I had always known. Mallory is furious with Dev since she has already lost 2 grandchildren, James and Nah, because of him, but he remains adamant in his decisions. As for me, I am doing a lot better since my divorce. I am focused solely on my children for now and don't want to keep holding on to the past. I won't say that this journey has been easy, but I will say that I don't regret anything that I have done. I'm glad I loved Dev and married him because otherwise, I would not have these 2 beautiful children. I'm also glad he cheated on me because this was the final push that I needed to break away from him. Otherwise, I might have been still stuck in the loveless marriage. I guess everything happens for a reason, and I believe in God's plan.